When I was in college, my mom kicked me out of the house and told me she didn't love me anymore. And what had I done to push her over the edge? I got my eyebrow pierced. The irony is that she'd been living with me in my piercing for several weeks with very minor grumblings, but it wasn't until she walked into my brother dyeing his hair blonde that it somehow turned into a fight about my eyebrow piercing. After screaming at me for about 15 minutes, she walked downstairs to our living room, slid into our peach leather sofa, tucked her knees under her small frame, and calmly repeated, "I don't love you anymore. Please get out of my house." Eventually, a few weeks later, my eyebrow piercing fell out and we laughed about the whole thing, but what I will never ever forget from that day, as long as I live, is my father. The man who'd never said "I love you" to me, had never shown me even a moment of tenderness, the look of sheer horror on his face as he turned to my mother, someone with whom he'd never disagreed in front of the kids, and said very loudly, "You can't talk to her like that. Take it back." 10 days in Korea, and here are the top 7 places I ate as a vegan. First was the adorable Loving Hut in Jeju, where they had only 5 things on the menu, but the cook filled our plates with panchan, jjigae, and jjajangmyeon. On the other end of the spectrum was this super fancy and pricey restaurant that had a prefix vegan menu of palace food. I could not do so without stopping by this all-vegan donuttery called Overt, where we literally got one of every single donut. My fave was the lemon basil. Then Shinsadong, an old-school Chinese restaurant with a separate veg menu, including mapatubu, mushroom, kampungi, jampong, and jjajangmyeon. That's not me with a fork. Maru Lounge was a surprise hit. When we told them that we were vegan, they busted out a separate vegan menu with vegan bulgogi, bibimbap, kalbi, and a burger. One of the best things about our trip was our breakfast buffet at Market Street Kitchen. They had labels for everything that clearly indicated what was vegan, and my whole family ate like kings every single freaking day. And finally, probably my favorite was this really cool cafe called Lidori that looked more like an art installation. And guess what? Half their pastries were vegan, including this pastry with this red bean paste and the best croissants ever. It's pretty hard being vegan in Korea, but with a little work, you can find some of the best food you'll ever eat. This is my mom and dad on their wedding day. This is from a photo shoot we did last month in Korea. I always wanted to do a Korean-style photo shoot, so my sister-in-law reserved a slot with CN Studio, a Korean photo studio in Seoul, where they do all your hair and makeup, let you pick out your entire outfit, and have multiple sets throughout their building for your photos. We were there for over 8 hours. My parents didn't have the money for a fancy wedding. My mom rented her dress. My dad wore the same suit he wore to work. Our photographer suggested that we treat this family photo shoot as a do-over for my parents, celebrating their near 50-year union. My mom got to pick out a couture gown. My father was dressed in a tux. And instead of frowning, they were encouraged to say kimchi for the camera. At one point, he even made them kiss, and I realized I've never seen my parents kiss before, and I thought I was gonna die. But overall, this is one of my favorite things about our trip to Korea. And it's how we turned this photo into this one. So you know that crush you had in high school that you were never brave enough to do anything about? Mine was JW. He was my voice teacher's son, and he had dark curly hair, bright blue eyes rimmed with these thick curling lashes. You know, the kind that looks like he's wearing mascara, but he's not. He was also a cellist, full on with vibrato, super talented. And his father was also a former Major League Baseball player, so JW was also very athletic. He was really popular, and I was not. But we did take orchestra and choir together because of his love of music. And I think he felt like he could be himself around me, like he didn't have to play the part of the popular guy. Once, after graduation, he was supposed to drive me to a party, but we ended up just parking in front of the house and talking for hours until we almost fell asleep, but nothing ever happened. Fast forward almost a decade later, in the weeks leading up to my wedding day, this was with my first husband, I thought so much about JW. I wondered, what if? The day before the wedding, I went to pick up the tuxedos for all the men, and as I was getting ready to pay, the clerk, he walks out holding all the tuxedos, and it was him. It was JW. Could it be a clear sign from the universe? But I didn't listen. I mean, how could I? My wedding was the next day. I got married, and 9 years later, I got a divorce. I looked him up after, but he didn't have a Facebook or an Instagram, and eventually I met my current husband who, well, is sexy as hell, runs marathons, and is an award-winning concert pianist. High school crushes, they don't always work out, but in some ways, I'm still that girl. Remember that scene in Queen of Tears where the men have to cook for the memorial service? Well, this is Chun, and I want to make some for my own resplendent non-memorial service dinner. We start with some zucchini that I slice up into discs, like this. Then I take about half of them and small dice them for the filling. I mash up some extra firm tofu, mix it with some soy sauce and sesame oil with my zucchini. I take a couple teaspoonfuls of the filling and I pack it on top of my zucchini disc. Then I dip the whole thing in some potato starch. Yes, you can use cornstarch, then in some just egg, and then onto my nonstick pan. Flip them all over for a few minutes, pop the lid on to steam the sides, and that is chun. I use the leftover discs to just dredge and dip without any filling, a simplified chun. For this recipe, I'm collabing with one of my favorite nonprofits, Support and Feed, an organization dedicated to mitigating the cost of climate change and increasing food security. Korean food has always been about making the most with very little, because everyone, not just the Queen of Tears, deserves a meal fit for royalty every once in a while.
Hi Lulu. Hi. Mwah. That's it. Yell at me.
To the fitness influencer who stopped me in the middle of my 10-mile run to give me advice on my form and then got upset when all I said was, "I'm good. Here's why I didn't accept your advice." I have no idea who you are, what your credentials are, but more importantly, you know nothing about me. The fact that I've been running for over a decade, have 6 marathons under my belt, have been working with a running coach for years, have been running with a running team for years, and that if I'm going to accept advice from anyone, it's going to be from them. You also don't know that I've had my gait analyzed by several experts, have a team of professionals whose job it is to make sure I recover from and prevent injuries, and that although my form may not look perfect to you after 10 years of trial and error, this is what works for me. You also don't know that although I love to run and I've got tens of thousands of miles under my feet, I'm not an elite runner and I don't have any desire to be one. And finally, the number one clue that I didn't want your advice, I didn't ask for it. So, to the fitness influencer who came to a dead stop in the middle of the path without so much as a heads up, even though she knew I was running just a few yards behind her so that her photographer could take pictures of her posing on the path, now that we're acquainted, here's some of my own unsolicited advice. Get out of my way. When I was little, I used to think my mom was not smart because I knew all these big English words that she didn't. Over time, though, we built this other language, one that didn't require words. In fact, when I think of one of the most powerful things my mother ever said to me, it doesn't involve any words at all, in Korean or English. You know what it was? It was this cheap, ugly lamp installed at her front door. You know, the kind you flick on at night when someone unexpected comes knocking. In high school, it was actually a symbol of fear, breaking my curfew and hoping the light wouldn't come on when I snuck home. I moved out of my parents' house when I got married at 26, and unfortunately, I'd have to knock on that door unexpectedly, far more often than a married woman should. At 11 o'clock, past midnight, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and without fail, the ugly yellow lamp would flicker to life, followed by the sign of my mother's face, the door swinging wide open, her narrow arms hustling me in. No words, no questions, but a common language nonetheless. This is me getting on stage about to give a 30-minute speech about my dog to 500 people from memory. I was asked to give the keynote speech to the Humane Society's annual Take Action for Animals conference in DC. So I got on a plane the day before by myself, even though I usually travel with my husband, who's sort of my hype man for these things. I have terrible stage fright, like once during a musical in Damn Yankees, no sound came out of my mouth. Another time at a recital, I started laughing in the middle of a song. My parents were mortified. So needless to say, I was petrified about the speech, not just anyone, but one of the most important animal advocacy groups in the world. Like the CEO was there was a woman from the Obama administration who was going to be speaking before me, and 500 freaking people. So as soon as I got to the hotel, I got into bed, woke up early, ate breakfast, and got ready. Practiced a little in my room, then went downstairs to go through a dress rehearsal on stage where I got to see just how massive the room was. I then did a short call with my hype man and hype girl before heading back downstairs to the humongous ballroom, which was now filled with 500 humans. The food looked so good, but not gonna lie, I was so nervous I really couldn't eat much. The 3 women who talked before me made me feel like I was literally the most underqualified person ever to speak, but before I knew it, I was being introduced and it was time to get up on stage and give my speech. I got up on stage and instantly regretted wearing shorts because I assumed everyone could now see how badly my knees were shaking. For a second, I forgot my entire speech, and I thought it was going to be Damn Yankees all over again until they carted me off stage. But then I gave my speech, didn't make a single mistake, and in the end, this happened, which almost made me cry. And that is the story of how the girl with crippling stage fright ended up getting a standing ovation for a 30-minute speech about her dog.